Hello, everybody. Thanks again for visiting my YouTube channel. This is the place where we discuss the Lord's Recovery Movement of Witness Lee, also known as the Local Church Movement. I've spent some time going back and reviewing my videos and my episodes, and I guess I enjoy them myself, but I did get a little bit uncomfortable in the sense that I was repeating myself. I was saying a lot of the same things over and over again. And I thought, how can I continue to try to do things that help people that used to be in the Lord's recovery and not just keep saying the same things over and over again? So, one thing that has really helped me, which I'd like to tie into everything, is the idea that there's all kinds of different kinds of people. One thing the Lord's recovery tried to do was make everybody the same, even to the point where functioning as a member was basically everybody doing the same thing. The interesting thing about God is He does value unity, but He also values variety. It really is true. There is a lot of difference in people. If you study it and you look at it, people are different, and God made people different. If you think about it, how can people that are so different in the way they think and approach things based upon the way they're made ever come to this kind of unity that is like thinking the same thing in the same way? It's not really possible. And I don't think God wanted that. And I really believe He made us all different to balance each other. So you'll have a person that's very emotional and who values people and relationships very much because of the way they're wired. And that person is going to look at things a certain way and have a certain perspective and a certain sense of priorities that a person who is more analytical and more concerned about what they think is the bottom line, regardless of how people feel. And those two people are going to have to find a way to get along. And neither one of them are right or wrong in an absolute sense. God gives us all kinds of perspectives to balance us because left to ourselves, we're all unbalanced. And I would like to tie this into my studies of the Myers-Briggs personality theory. I think it's very valid, and I can even tie it back to the Bible, which I'm going to try to do, and hopefully give you some help and some ideas of how to look at things a little differently and a little more broadly. If you don't know the Myers-Briggs personality theory, it's been adapted by a lot of people. It's very much accepted now as the way things really work with personalities and temperaments. Basically, there are 4 letters they use to identify a personality type. And there's a total of 16 based on the combination of the letters, and all of them exist. Some are rarer than others, but it's based on 4 ideas, and those are categorized or identified by certain letters. I or E, either you're introverted or extroverted. N or S, either you're an intuitive person or a sensing person. And then there's T or F, thinking or feeling. Either you're a person who values thoughts and ideas or you're a person that values feelings and sentiments. And the last one, a P or a J, is a person who is either a P means perceiving. It means that they look out and they go, what's possible? What can I do? There's lots of different options. These are people that tend to not like lists. They don't like a lot of organization. They want to be able to do what they need to do when they need to do it. Judging person is a person who more thinks about let's organize things. Let's get things in an organization. We got to plan everything. So I myself am an INTJ. I'm one of the rarer types. Basically, I'm introverted. I prefer to be alone, or I prefer to recharge my batteries alone. I'm intuitive in that I think very much in intuitive, abstract ways, more deeply of trying to establish patterns. And I'm a T, so I'm trying to organize my thoughts. And the J part feeds the organization. So you can see that effect in this website where I'm trying to get thoughts together about what the Lord's recovery was all about. And there are 16 types. God made it this way. There are many different types of people, and it's very interesting to read about these combinations of these 4 particular areas and how they make into a person. I believe it even ties back to the Bible. There are four main types, and each main type is divided into four types, totaling 16. The four types are whether you're either an NT, an NF, or an SJ, or an SP. There were previous theories, more general, that arranged everything into these four types. One you might be familiar with is whether you're a choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, and sanguine. And those were also identified by someone else as idealist, guardian, rational, artisan. By my study and observation, these four types also correspond to the four living creatures in Ezekiel and Revelation, and also the personalities as revealed in the four Gospels. The NF, or choleric, is an idealist who majors in leadership and inspiration, powerful and ruling, and they correspond to the lion, or Christ as King, as revealed in the book of Matthew. The SJ, or melancholic, or guardian, majors in devotion and comfort, long-suffering and service, and they correspond to the ox, or Christ as servant, as revealed in the book of Mark. The NT, or phlegmatic, are rational. They major in insight and enlightenment, rationality and humanity, and they correspond to the man, Christ as man, as revealed in the Gospel of Luke. Then the SP, or sanguine, or artisan, who majors in creativity and delight, transcendence and divinity, corresponds to the eagle, Christ as the transcendent God, and divine life is revealed in the book of John. So that's my insight on that. So this is something that exists in creation. And it's interesting that there's four of them, and we know that four is the number of creation in the Bible. So it's fascinating and amazing, and I think it's very real. But what's interesting is when you have these 16 types made up of these four characteristics, then you really start to see how these different personality types and these ways of being and these ways of looking at things through your consciousness are different. God made all kinds of different people and all kinds of ways of looking at things and all kinds of perspectives. We cannot rely on one person to have the total truth. As I said, I'm an INTJ. I have three sons, and my wife, who's actually my former wife now, what I do is I'm intuitive and I'm organized because I'm a J, and what I try to organize is my thoughts about the world in an inward way. And being introverted, I'm happy being by myself thinking about these things. So my thing is my intuitive thinking, I try to organize it, and that adds up to the way I do things, the way I look at things. And my personality type tends to be very self-confident, very rational, very opinionated, and there are downsides. Like, for example, I tend to be argumentative, and I have to watch that. I have trouble relating to emotional people. I have trouble conforming to a structured environment, which is not necessarily a bad thing, which you can probably appreciate with this YouTube channel. My former wife, who I still have a good relationship with, she's an INFJ, and actually I only found that out recently. I always thought she was an ISFJ, and ISFJs and INFJs are different in a very important way. An ISFJ is somebody who is more concrete about the world. They just look at the world and see it for what it is. They're feelings, so they care about people. They're organized, so they try to get organized with helping people. But my wife is an INFJ. And the thing about an INFJ is they're a lot like an INTJ, except instead of trying to organize their thoughts, they try to organize their feelings. They're intuitive about trying to find patterns in feelings. And because they're a J, they're pressed to organize these feelings. And they're the rarest type, and this can often lead them to a kind of an internal conflict because they're trying to resolve how they feel about things. And one thing they're sensitive to is somebody telling them what to think, which is what I did. So you can do the rest of the math on that. But I have another son who's an INFP. And these kind of people just tend to be good, nice, friendly people who just want everybody to get along. And because they're open-ended, instead of trying to be organized, they don't try to push anything on anybody. My son is like this. He's big-hearted. He just wants everybody to get along. He cares about people. I have two extroverts. The oldest one is an ESFP, which is exactly the opposite of me. That means he's extroverted. He likes to be around people. He just looks at the world concretely. He focuses on his feelings, and he's very open-ended. And these type of people tend to be performers. They tend to be people that are the life of the party. And that's the way he is. He's a musician. He's performed on stage, and you'll never see him sitting in a corner thinking deep thoughts. My youngest son is an ENFP. And these are a little different because their intuitive side causes them to think a little differently. So they more focus on ideals and great causes. And they can be good leaders. The problem is their spontaneity tends to keep them from getting organized to do much about it. They're very good at inspiring people. They're not so great at carrying out a plan to actually do anything about it. And my youngest son tends to have trouble with completing tasks. So that's perfectly in keeping with his personality type. So this stuff's very real. And it speaks to the wonderful variety that God has created us with and how there's very different people. Because you can be different degrees of each of these because it's where you are on a continuum. So all these things mixed together produce the variety of people in the world. And then our experiences and the things we've learned and how it all works out in the end makes millions of different types of people. It's kind of like the colors. All the colors are based on the primary colors. If you're on a computer, they're based on red, green, and blue. And these three colors combined like 64,000 colors on the computer. That's amazing. That's the same way with personalities. So it doesn't stand to reason that one person's perspective on everything should be the way we all think. It more stands to reason that we all contribute, and somehow through this contribution we come to a truth that's better than what anybody could say. As an INTJ, I tend to be a person of ideas, and I tend to be opinionated about my ideas, and maybe my type of person goes a little bit further to try to quantify what should and shouldn't be, and we're helpful in that way. But it's always up to others to take that and process it and apply it as they think best. And I really believe that's the way God made it. Talking about Witness Lee, my feeling is Witness Lee was probably an ENTJ. And it's close to me, but he's extroverted, which means he's more comfortable in social situations. Probably because a lot of the strong, especially insistent leaders through history have been ENTJs. They're very persuasive. They've thought about what they believe. They are organized in their thinking. They're systematized in their thinking. And their extroversion allows them to take control of an audience and direct it. And a lot of the leaders have been this way. Think about Ron Kangas. I'm trying to think about what type of person he is. I think he's probably an introvert. I think he's probably an I. I think he's probably an INFJ. And a lot of these guys in Lord's Recovery are going to be J's because they believe in being organized. They believe in the way it's done and it's got to be quantified. So that would be my guess. Talking about this, I think it's very helpful because I think the way you felt in the Lord's Recovery and the way you responded to it and the way you're responding to it now and relating to it has a lot to do with your personality type and how you process information and feelings and how you express that in your final conclusion about things. So I would encourage you to take one of these tests. There's one on 16personalities.com, 16personalities.com that's fun to take. And it really is revealing. When you start reading about these things and learning more about these personality types, especially yourself and the people in your life, you start to see things. When you start to do this, you can start to see how people are just different and they look at things different and they have different values and they have different priorities. How does that fit into the Lord's Recovery's view of thinking the one thing, which is this very detailed way of looking at everything? You can't shoehorn people into that. And God didn't intend it, obviously, because He made us all different. And no matter how gifted you are, and no matter how clear you think you have some weaknesses. Things, and they tend to be very positive with the attributes because they don't want to make anybody feel bad. But when you start studying the shortcomings of these different personality types, you realize how they can fail and how nobody is adequate to do everything. And again, that points to the wonderful diversity of God's creation of humanity, that we're all different and we all can contribute. To me, it just negates the Lord's Recovery's approach to everything, that everybody has to be the same, everybody has to think the same thing, and functioning just means repeating Witness Lee's ministry, that Witness Lee had everything right. Witness Lee couldn't have everything right because he wasn't equipped to do it. He didn't have a universal personality. Now, I told you that the four basic personality types are delineated in the creatures and the Gospels. Jesus was portrayed in these four basic personality types. One thing is probably true, that the writers of these particular Gospels were probably the personality type of the type they emphasized in Jesus. Don't you think that John was a person who valued the divine, the transcendent, the spiritual, the mysterious? Because that's what he wrote about. That's what he talked about. And Luke was a physician. He was a person who was an analytic thinker. And he portrayed Jesus as the man. Mark was probably a person who valued service and simplicity. And he portrayed Jesus as a servant. Matthew was probably a person who was somewhat of a leader. He was a tax collector, and he focused on this value of Jesus as the king. That's possible, but all four of them add up to everything. So Jesus has aspects of all these personality types, is what I'm saying. He understands all these personality types. He understands all the perspectives. He understands all the ways of thinking and looking and feeling and acting on things. Going forward, I would just encourage you to look into this and find out what type of temperament and personality you have and those around you, to realize that God made people very, very different and diverse. And no one has the monopoly on anything when it comes to reality. And certainly Witness Lee didn't. And certainly the Blended Brothers don't. And so again, this works against their whole philosophy. Now, how do you find unity with all this? Well, that's what Jesus does, and that's what the faith does, and that's what the Spirit does. You don't do it through organizing it. You do it through people in their own experiences arriving at the unity of the faith. And that's the way it happens. So again, the Lord's Recovery's model does not and cannot work and is actually destructive. So I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted to offer something a little different and kind of get off the drumbeat of the same things I've been saying. Thanks again for listening. See you next time. Take care.